Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Coast to coast, pole to pole, all around the world on the internet, thanks to the marvel of technology. I'm coming at you live from a little old guest house in Memphis, Tennessee. This is Keith Anthony Blanchard. You're listening to the Center of Light Radio, Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement, radio for the soul and the transformation station. A couple announcements really quick. Metaphysics returns to Memphis August 5th and 6th at the Agri Center International with the Memphis Metaphysical Fair. The Memphis Metaphysical Fair will play host to psychic mediums, tarot card readers, crystal and stone healers, and vendors. It's got a Native American motif, paranormal investigating, and 20 workshops over the 2 days, August 5th and 6th, Agri Center International, Memphis, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. $10 for one-day adult pass, $16 for both. Get a little deal right there. Military discounts available. Children under 12 are free. Workshops range from $0 to $10. Vending booths are still available. Go to memphismetaphysical.com for more information. I will be giving a 2-hour presentation there on radical transformation. I'm going to go inside of you, so to speak, collectively, and find ways to open you up so you can see the bigger picture. We're going to pop open your awareness. Trust me, I can do this. I'm confident in what I can do about that. And the rest of the presentation is going to be about empowering you with the information so you can begin to live, dwell, and be in that space all the time. And you will see yourself and your awareness expand. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science. It's like lifting you lift weights to create body mass. You start expanding your awareness mass, and then it begins to grow. It begins to expand. And next thing you know, you become very endowed with awareness. You can see with your ears. Trust me. Seeing is not necessarily with the eyes. A blind man once said that it doesn't require sight to climb Mount Everest. It requires vision. Pretty powerful, but yet simple, profound idea. Memphis Metaphysical Fair, August 5th and 6th. This divine man right here, if you're watching the video, Swamiji Viswayoga, is coming back to Memphis in September, and I have the blessed opportunity to interview him for the third time. His tour title, the theme for this year, is Healing the Earth by Purifying the Waters. And so I'm going to ask some pretty big, powerful questions from a God-realized man. Hopefully we can bring some information back to Center of Light Radio, but also the interview with Swamiji. But through the questions I'm going to put to him, if the theme is purifying the earth, healing the earth by purifying the waters, then it makes sense to me I should be asking questions about Fukushima. It makes sense to me I should be asking questions about the supposed oil spout in the Gulf of Mexico, that BP oil spill that happened. Is it really capped? What can we do about these kinds of things? So these are the questions I'm going to be putting to Swamiji Viswayoga. He will be here in September, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to video interview him, which is going to be absolutely cool. And when you're around a divine man like this, it's not something to be said. Me telling you about it really soils and sullies the experience. When you're around someone like that who is that illumined, my God, that's exactly what it is. One more quick message. Kenneth Pass, recent guest here on Center of Light Radio. Go to centeroflightradio.com. On the opening page, you'll see a flying saucer. When that flying saucer settles down, you'll see a donate button. We're trying to raise money. We're almost to our goal to get Kenneth Pass to Arizona. When he was a kid, he was on a camping trip. He went hiking with some other kids and a few adults, and they were picked up by aliens and brought back 10,000 years. I know this sounds far-fetched. I know it does. I believe the guy. I do. Brought back 10,000 years. And if anybody out there is familiar with Prophecy Rock, those petroglyphs you see on that rock, that's Kenneth. He says, that's me coming out of the ship with the other kids and the adults. While he was away for quite a few years, and when he was brought back to his present moment as if they never left. While he was away, one of the aliens pissed him off. So he hid a piece of their technology somewhere in Arizona, and he wants to take a bus ride because Kenneth is a very, very simple guy. And I think our goal is like $500 to get him to and fro Arizona so he can go find where he hid this thing and bring it to the Hopi and to the Pueblo, because that is the responsible people, and they would know what to do with it or how to protect and guard it, keep it safe and secret. And so what the gig is, when Kenneth comes back, he's going to tell us all about his journey doing that thing, and that's going to be a phenomenal show. Let's just get right down to Center of Light Radio business. Make sure you dial 888-919-2355. That's 888-919-2355 if you want to talk to myself. Or my dear bro, phenomenal human being. I've been wringing my hands. I've been waiting to talk to my friend, Mr. John C. Robinson. He is a clinical psychologist with a second doctorate in ministry and ordained interfaith minister. The author of, listen to this, 9 books and numerous articles on the psychology, spirituality, and mysticism of the New Aging, and a frequent speaker at conscious aging conferences. His major work includes The Death of the Hero, Birth of the Soul, But Where is God? So forth and so on. He has tons and tons of bodies of work out there, and it's amazing. And it's just a delight for me to talk to John. John, welcome to Center of Light Radio.
Hey, Keith, it's wonderful to be here. I love being with you. We always have so much fun.
Yeah, we do, man. And, you remind me of who I want to be. We talked about in the past, some of the interviews we had, we talked about the idea of death and how we get closer and to it every second that ticks by. And I said this to someone the other day, that you have made me almost want to invite my death. I mean, you make me excited about it from our past interviews, that you took all the horror and all the bad things out of it. It's like I'm looking forward to it.
Well, death is not what you think it is. It's thinking about problems that make them into problems. When you stop thinking and open your awareness to something that's happening, it's far more radiant and divine and miraculous than you ever thought. So it's way better to do that than to dwell in fears and anxieties. So welcome to the journey.
So, John, I couldn't wait to get you back on this show. And you have a new book that just hit the market, and it's called The Divine Human.
Yes.
What is the divine human?
So the divine human is somebody who experiences himself or herself as literally divine. It's not a metaphor. It's not a fantasy. It's not a nice idea. It's a literal experience. It's a state of consciousness that changes the way we experience ourself and the world. So it's a consciousness when you get into it, and it's not that hard to get into. It's a consciousness that's free of identity, time, and story, and all the problem-ridden ideas and labyrinth that's in the left brain, it's in our mind. And in this consciousness, you begin to experience your awareness as God's awareness, and your being as God's being. And as you begin to dissolve who you think you are and move into this pure state of awareness, you are that which is, and that's God. So this book is all about how to have that experience and how that transforms not only our lives, but our perception of the world itself.
So would you support the idea of incorporating meditation as a daily practice for those who may be new to this way of thought, this way of being, this way of living one's life?
Oh, sure. I think the one of the things we have to do as we grow spiritually is to begin to quiet the mind. And meditation, and there's so many different types of meditation, but meditation is very useful in just sitting still and watching thoughts and watching how your thoughts begin to become quieter and settle, and then moving into the space between thoughts and beginning to realize that your thoughts are not who you are. They hook you. You ride off on them like a horse galloping away, but it's not who you are. And when you begin to learn how to not identify with your thoughts, you open to a spacious consciousness that's full of love. And that's the real, I mean, it's not just about relaxation. It's not just about, being more conscious or mindful. It's about experiencing the divine consciousness that pervades the entire universe and discovering that is your consciousness.
John, one thing that meditation does, it does help relax a person, helps them to feel at ease or at peace. But there are many people who think that it's strictly for relaxing. Trust me when I tell you out there, listen, audience, these Tibetan Buddhist monks, they're not trying to relax. They're quite relaxed already. They're dropping into the cosmic dialogue. So much so that they're in the stream. They are the stream.
Yeah. Yeah, you enter the flow. See, you construct this idea of yourself, and you park it in the left hemisphere of the brain, and pretty soon it runs and hijacks the whole show, and you actually believe that's who you are. And as you quiet and still your thoughts, you drop into a fathomless interior and into a fathomless state of awareness that opens you to the consciousness that is everywhere. And then that is the beginning of a mystical life, because from that consciousness, the world itself begins to be radiant and luminous and infinitely precious.
See, I'm sitting here watching you because for those out there who we're going to have this in video format in the next week. But I'm watching John as he expresses himself, and I want to use this word in quotes. He's channeling. He's actually in that place as he is giving this interview. John, would that be a true statement that you somehow lose identity of John and become something else? Not, I wouldn't say become, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It's the kind of thing that it's such a state of liberation to not be saddled to who you think you are. And when that thought dissolves and into the great unknown, there's a sense of wonder and beauty and freedom and joy and love that is infinite. And you realize, I've been wasting most of my life trying to be somebody. I don't need to be anybody. In fact, I don't want to be anybody. I want to transcend my anybodyness and become one with the whole. If we did that, the world would be experienced as heaven on earth, and we would be experienced as divine humans, and that's the whole point.
So what is the state of consciousness that creates divine human? That would be God conscious, yes?
Yeah, like the mystics tell us from time immemorial that there is really only one consciousness everywhere in the universe. Now, what's happened to us human beings is that as we developed our capacity to think and conceptualize and impose belief systems on the world, they were very, very useful for survival. But pretty soon we began to mistake our beliefs for the world itself. And what happens is that's the state of consciousness we need to transcend and dissolve, because when it goes, what's left is the consciousness in which it was all arising. And in that consciousness, you'll discover an entirely different, you have no identity. You are the consciousness that lives everything. You can come up to a tree and you can touch the tree and you realize that it's aware of you touching it and it's touching you. And there's this great sense of communion for all of creation. So this is the whole point. It's a state of the divine human consciousness is pure awareness free of all thinking. And in that space, you're it.
You know, I love the way you use the tree analogy, that the tree is aware of you. I guess back in the late 60s when they had the tree huggers, they were the front runners. Right?
The lovely woman who stayed up on that tree for all those months, she became one with the tree. She developed a different state of consciousness as she was moving in the wind and living up there for so long. Being in the wilderness transforms you. There's a consciousness there that brings alive an original state of almost aboriginal consciousness in your own psyche.
Mm-hmm. So, John, since your book is titled The Divine Human, and the question I posed and you answered it about what is it, and we're talking about the divine human in your book, which is getting to a space in your life that you begin to experience the oneness of you and Creator that lives inside. How does one really go about becoming that and doing that and being successful at it? I'm sure your book tells about the path or in detail how to go about it, but how does one find himself very well on the path of becoming illumined?
Yeah, so I have lots of exercises in the book that's all about that, but becoming a divine human is really a three-stage process. We begin by understanding what the mystics have been telling us all along about our own divinity. I mean, Walt Whitman says, "Divine am I inside and out, and I make holy whatever I touch and am touched from." And I've got dozens of quotes like that. They've been telling us all along that we are already divine. We've just lost the ability to experience. So first we have to understand what they're teaching us. Secondly, we have to start using spiritual practices that awaken this actual experience. And it's really not so hard. We think that stopping thinking is an impossible thing, and people wrestle with meditation and they end up being so frustrated. The meditation I like to recommend is much more of a sensory awareness meditation. If you are standing on a tightrope and walking across, a body of water, for example, you can't think about your resume. You can't think about your portfolio. You're so much in your senses that thinking is absolutely stopped. So it's really clear that if you become intensely awake and aware, thinking stops and you enter a different state of consciousness in which you are one with the whole, and then you begin to experience it. So once you do that over time, then this new divine awareness, this new ineffable, beautiful state of consciousness begins to move up through you and progressively remakes your personality, your behavior, your view of the world, and increasingly you come into quote problems, which are really just thoughts that you've made up about a situation. You come into and you see through the whole drama that is the human struggle, and you realize, why would I want to do that? So anyway, so you were transformed. It's not a one-time thing, but over time you are transformed. And as part of aging, because in aging, all these beliefs about ourselves just begin to go away naturally because we're not who we used to be, and this new possibility for consciousness opens up. And if we pay attention to it, we open into it.
John, everyone who listens to this show often knows I'm really big about awareness. Awareness. I'm sure there is. And of course they're all equal across the board. But I think awareness has to be probably the biggest key component of spiritual awakening. Well, think about the word awakening. The word awakening synonymous is awareness. And when you can become peripherally aware, and even though I'm looking at you on the screen, I'm very much aware of the sound of the air conditioner behind me. I'm very much the heat, aware of the candle that's by me. I'm aware. And I remember the last interview you and I did, you were talking about now when you, at this stage of your life, with this stage of awareness that you have, when you with something, you are with it fully. You're fully engaged with it.
Yes. There's nothing standing between this consciousness and what is. See, normally we label and explain and define and distance ourselves conceptually from the divine world. And when we wake up and stop thinking and start experiencing direct sensory awareness of everything, we discover that the world has always been the divine. The divine is in two shapes. It's divine consciousness and there's divine being. So when we enter pure consciousness, we are literally experiencing God's consciousness. And when we bring that consciousness into our own physical being, we are literally experiencing the being of God. So what we need to do is to not think about this, because that would take us right out of the experience, but instead to stay in it and to dwell in that state until we feel ourselves changing. There's a sense of joy, that Hindu phrase, Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. You realize that it's all that. And then this capacity, aging is about opening the heart to love. And this process of awakening is about awakening to a kind of love that changes you. And you just, as I describe in the book over and over again, I sometimes have to contain myself from dancing on tabletops and, taking the grandkids and swinging them around because everything is so joyous in this state.
You brought to my attention, you reminded me of something that happened today. Today, I was eating some food in a restaurant, and there was an older couple sitting next to me, and the gentleman, I didn't know where he went. He disappeared for a moment, but I can see this elderly lady. She had to be towards her late 80s, and she was trying to hoist herself up out of the chair, and I saw her try to move forward 2 or 3 times, and I got up and motioned towards her, and grabbed her hand and helped her up, and she got up and she said, "Thank you, young man." And I had a word with the gentleman because he brought the walker for her to proceed to walk out of the building. And I had to control my emotions because what moved through me wasn't about the patting me on the back for helping this lady. What moved through me was the reward in and of itself. It was grand. It was expanded. In other words, it was God coming through me, and I was able to touch that for the moment.
When you get out of the way, you are lived by this divine universe. It's absolutely beautiful. And the thing about older people is that the outside of them is a disguise. It looks different, it looks old, but on the inside, the consciousness is timeless. Okay, the consciousness is ageless. The consciousness is pure if they pay attention to it. And so it's an entirely different experience. Rather than feeling sorry for older people, we should say, wow, they have an opening to a possibility for experiencing the world that is glorious. And
Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I could wax on, but yeah.
What is mysticism? How is it different from religion and spirituality? And who becomes a mystic?
Good. So mysticism is really the direct first-hand experience of God, and it comes in like three flavors. There's big mystical experiences from which all religions arise. There's the smaller mystical experiences like when you're a kid and you look up at the night sky and you go and your awe just takes over, or the first time you see your brand new baby and count the toes and you're in a state of just ecstasy. And then there's mystical consciousness, and that's the state that you can get into intentionally that has the same quality. So that's mysticism. Religion is all the religions are born from the mystical experience. This huge experience of divinity, of oneness, of revelation is then encoded in the history, scripture, theology, and practices of the religion, and the whole body of religion is meant to help carry this vision forward so other people can understand the religious or spiritual nature of the universe. Unfortunately, the ego takes over too often, the conceptual mind takes over too often, and pretty soon we have 10,000 books on religion when the whole thing is really about just waking up. So we need to realize that religion has a positive and a side that limits us, because one day we have to leave the conceptual mind. We have to leave our theories, our theologies, our beliefs behind us. Like Rumi, when he was a mystic, a Sufi mystic, but he was a university professor. And one day, this enlightened guy named Shams jumps over the fence, takes his books, throws them to the ground, and says, "Now you must live what you know." You see, and that's what the mystic has to do. Spirituality is the third prong of this, and that is that in every church or synagogue or mosque, there may be, say, 300 people. There'll be one religion, but there'll be 300 different spiritualities, because each of us has to make sense out of the teaching, our own personal experiences, the life experiences we've had. And so the spiritual journey is the one of moving from general knowledge to personal knowledge, then into mystical knowledge, which is transcending belief systems into the first-hand experience of the divine world. I hope that explains it. Oh,
very clearly, very clearly. Where I was going to go with when I told you the story about the old lady that I helped was how God moves inside and how we begin to recognize it, because that's the question I posed a little earlier. Someone said something really, really short and to the point, and I thought it was just really, really cool yesterday. If you want to find out what God is, it's imagination. It's your own imagination. Because if God created humans in this image, in his image, his imagination and likeness, as we think, therefore we create. Someone simply put it to me yesterday, just saying imagination. It's imagination, the ability to conceive.
We are not different from the divine, so that everything that moves through us is the divine moving through us, including imagination. The problem is when we get this idea of ourselves as being separate from all that, then the ego starts to take over things and begin to exploit imagination for self-aggrandizing reasons, and that's when we get in trouble. But yeah, we're made out of God. It's happening all the time. We are what God is. And part of this book is really about finding the space and the quiet and the deep self-connection to be able to say, I am what God is, and then experience that rising up inside as your very own pure, essential nature.
Love it. I've always used this when I do talks is, if you're a person of Scripture and you've read that God is omnipresent, okay, we can all agree that the dictionary is our resource for language. It's a book that was created to convey thought, ideas, and concepts. So if we now go to Webster's and we look up omnipresent, it says present in all places at all times. So there's no place it is not. So if it's everything, it's the shirt, it's the chair I'm sitting on, it's the microphone, it's the sounds coming out of the speakers for those listening. It's me, it's my skin, it's everything. And it's our task to become awake to the fact.
To experience that. The divineness of every single thing, the luminosity of all being. It's a wonderful experience. And so we get so tangled up in our thinking we have to go someplace and be someone that we forget that we're already there. There's no place to go. This is it.
John, we have a question from the chat room from Don Daniel. He asked the question, does Dr. Robinson use out-of-body experiences in his form of sensory meditation?
Well, I haven't, but I've always been intrigued with out-of-body experiences. I think they're absolutely amazing. And the near-death experiences, too. I mean, we build a conceptual frame around consciousness and believe, therefore, that that's me, but it isn't. So it's not at all surprising that we leave that frame and have out-of-body experiences. But I haven't been using them personally. I'd love to.
Yeah, you and I shared a couple of my stories last time we interviewed, some of the mystical stuff that happens when sometimes, I wish it would happen a little more often, when I fall asleep. John, let me ask you a question. What changes when we learn to experience our own divinity?
Well, several things. Identities, problems, goals, and beliefs begin to disappear because they're only structures of mind. Okay, so when I walk out there and I can easily create a whole bunch of problems and say someone has cut me off on the road, or this person doesn't like me, or I should have more money, or whatever. We can generate problems, but in this state of consciousness, which is free of thought, that doesn't exist. And as we dissolve the multiple lenses of thought that obscure the radiant ground of being, the world grows brighter and more luminous, more beautiful and holy, and literally we begin to see heaven on earth. It never left. We left. We thought that we were in the wrong place. We thought that we had to overcome our badness, but it was all a mistake. It was all a mistaken assumption. And then as we tap into our own divine being, we discover the bliss, love, and spiritual wisdom that's always been part of the divine ground, okay? So there's a sense of joy that gives you freedom that, you can just, it's like those old songs from the 60s, just grooving down the road. It feels so good to have this light playing on your forehead and see the speckled pattern of sun and shadow. And you literally move into a different space of awareness that is so genuinely joyful that the problems of the world really go away. And then we increasingly become what God is. We see through God's eyes. The mystics have been telling us that God sees through our eyes, hears through our ears, feels through our touch, and that as we let the self get dissolved and out of the way, we become that which God is. Not that we are the only thing God is, but everything is one with God, and therefore when we are not, God is through us. And if we were there, the wars would disappear, the hunger would disappear, all these, because the mind divides people and separates and segregates things and then judges things good and bad, and pretty soon we have wars and conflicts. It's all a construction and fabrication of the left brain.
I like that. When you talked about what the mystics have to say, that God sees through our eyes and listens through our ears. Well, whose eyes and ears is it? Well, it's mine. And it's like I ask people often to point to themselves. John, I've only seen one person in my life point like this. Say, point to yourself, and you point here. Okay, and I tell you to point to God, and you point here, and I say, well, that it's synonymous. You're pointing to yourself. Really?
Yeah.
So what do we do? How do we get rid of the blocks? How do we consciously become aware of the fact that we're divine? What are some of the ideas you could bring forth about that?
Well, I mean, there's been such a taboo about that. I mean, it's been considered, sacrilege to say that I am God. I mean, and that's because religious authority does not want us to say that, because they want to maintain authority over what is true and false and what we should believe. But so that if you, as a mystic, realize you don't need anybody else to tell you what you believe because you experience it firsthand, then that resolves a lot of problems. And so first of all, we've got to get past the idea that it's wrong to feel this way. And the second thing we need to do is practice feeling this way. The fact of sitting very, very still, learning to quiet your mind, and then simply saying, I am what God is. And it's like a mantra. It's like a phrase that you can repeat inside, and it sends a sonar down into the depths of your divine being, and you wait for it to come back as an experience. And you say, I am what God is, or I am God's being, or this is God's consciousness, whatever you want to use. And you say that, and you begin to wake up, and you begin to realize that this God is in the depths of your own being, waiting to be invited to flow up into your essence. So as you do this without obstruction, without saying, "Oh, I shouldn't feel this way," or "Now I have to think about this," don't ruin it by thinking about it. Just let it come up, and then go outside into the wilderness, or into the trees, or into a daycare program, and just see what you see now from this altered state of consciousness. All of this is so simple. We make it hard by thinking about it, by thinking it's hard, and by feeling we have to find more experts to teach us how to do it.
Yeah, we've become difficult. We've learned difficulty, and we've lost simplicity.
Yeah. We were all enlightened at the age of 4. At 3, there was no, concept between my being totally enchanted by the world and the world as being a magical place. There was nothing changing that. And then through education and parents and peers and all that stuff, we began to realize that, I'm an object. I have to evaluate myself. I'm a good or a bad object, and now I have to improve myself because I'm full of flaws. And there goes the journey of life that we do for the next 40 or 50, 60 years trying to be good enough, which is an entirely made-up script, a narrative that strangles us, with its tyranny. And in aging, when all that falls apart, we realize we're back to where we started, and it was always okay. It was always just beautiful. I want to give you a really interesting example from this research I've been exploring recently that I was very aware of when I was in graduate school in psychology. There is this split brain research that Sperry and Gazzaniga did. What happened was that people who had uncontrollable seizure disorders, they would start on one side of the brain and then they would take over the whole brain. And so when medications, and there were some people, nothing would help, what they did was a neurosurgery that severed the corpus callosum, which was a thick band of fibers across the 2 hemispheres. So when they did that, the seizure could not migrate from one side to the other. It had a certain amount of practical usefulness. But then they began to find some really interesting things start to happen. A guy might be getting ready to go to work, and he's beginning to pull up his pants with his right hand, which is the left brain. His left hand would push it away and wouldn't want to do it. Or he'd be trying to hug his wife with his right hand, the left hand would be pushing away. Or the right side of the brain, you'd have to understand how they did this, but it's all entirely scientifically demonstrable. The left side of the brain was asked whether it believed in God. It said no. The right side of the brain was asked whether it believed in God. It said yes. There was a recent example that came out where this woman who had this surgery, every time she began to smoke with her right hand, her left hand would slap her upside the head. Well, it turns out, but here's the example I want to share. This woman named Gilbo Taylor, who's a neuroscientist, who really understands the brain structure, had a left hemisphere stroke. The left hemisphere is where all the beliefs and ideas and speech and language and stuff get stored. So it didn't work. It couldn't override her system. So as she began to drift into this new state of consciousness, this is what she began to experience. She said, in the absence of my left hemisphere's analytical judgment, I was completely entranced by feelings of tranquility, safety, blessedness, euphoria, omniscience. My left hemisphere had been trained to perceive myself as a solid, separate from others. Now, released from that restrictive circuitry, my right hemisphere relished in its attachment to the eternal flow, whereby I exist at one with the universe. It is the seat of my divine mind, the knower, the wise woman. She says, for all my life, I really had been a figment of my own imagination. Okay? I was simply a being of light, okay, radiating life into the world. So what I found absolutely fascinating about this is that the right hemisphere consciousness is always there. It just doesn't have a capacity for verbal speech, so it can't interrupt the left. So mostly, in the old days, it used to be called the silent hemisphere because people thought nothing went on in there. When the left is quieted, either through meditation or spiritual practices or by stroke, the right hemisphere comes online and this new kind of consciousness expands. Ram Dass, who I'm sure you know, had a left hemisphere stroke. And he doesn't have very good speech now, but he's the happiest guy I've ever seen. And Kenneth had the same thing. He was a Catholic priest that lived for like 30 years in India and was really beautifully ensconced and aware of both all mystical traditions of both cultures. When he had his left hemisphere stroke, he felt as if he'd finally exceeded or transcended this tyranny of the left patriarchal brain, so that he could finally be one with the universe. What's really interesting is this divine consciousness is always in us. It's always trying to get our attention. We just aren't paying attention because we're so caught up with our belief systems. So the message is...
So John, how do we know when we're being spoken to? How do we know? How do we differentiate that from all the bullcrap thoughts that just try to take over?
Okay, you got to have no thought. It's about no thought. If you have thought, then you're being called into the left brain. You're going to be tricked. You're going to say, is this really happening? And then you're going to start thinking about whether it's really happening, okay? What you want to do is stop thinking, heighten awareness, come into a pure sensory mode of consciousness, and then awaken what I would call the awe response, AWE, the awe. We all know how to do awe, like when you fall in love or when you see an enormous waterfall and you go, oh my God, that's awe. So you know how to stop thinking. You know how to heighten the awareness, because if you were in a room at night and you heard something thump in the bedroom when there's nobody there, you'd wake right up. And if you add it all to that, you now have a state of consciousness that's free of thought. In that state, just pay attention. If you start thinking about it, you'll go back into the left. Just be there and let that state expand. And pretty soon you'll notice that you're being lived by something else. That's the divine self.
So are you saying that you could fake the awe?
Well, I guess you could.
I could force it.
You can't fake awe. No, but you can evoke awe.
Evoke, that's the word. Thank you very much.
You can evoke awe.
Just by calling it up, yes.
Oh my gosh, anything you look at, take a flower, look at it, and begin to feel awe, because it is absolutely a magnificent mystery, a mystical miracle. So, and the more you look at it, your awe opens up, and you begin to see that it is full of divinity. Always was. We just gave it a name and went on to the next thing. So allowing one's self to take in, if we're looking at a flower, or if you're looking at your child, whatever it is, allowing yourself to be in that place of invoking awe, like I'm really going to look at this. I'm really going to take it in fully. That is what will pop you open in your awareness, yes? And then more information comes in. Yes.
Beyond, right.
Bring that same consciousness into your being, the being of your being, your physicality. and as you feel the being of your being, which is what the mystics all talk about, you discover this sense of joy. And then what you want to do, you want to start loving everything, because the love becomes through the whole state of being, because it's not being suppressed by thinking. So it's not that it's hard to do. It's just we always get distracted by saying, oh, is this right? Maybe I should be doing something else. Maybe I should read a book more. You're not going to find it in books. You're going to find it in this first-hand awakened state, which you can do right now. It's here. It's present.
888-919-2355. 888-919-2355 is your number to dial if you want to speak to myself or my phenomenal dear friend, guest today, Mr. John C. Robinson. So, John, I did receive your ebook, and you can bet I'm going to dive into it. Anything I need to know before I dive in it? Something that may help me take it all in. Anything you'd offer?
Well, you've always tacitly known that you were divine. You just didn't have to have words for it. It was the magic of early childhood that got written over by beliefs about your inferiority and your flawedness. So that it was always that this is about rediscovering it. So I always knew when I was a young child. I remember the very moment where I was just was jumping from furniture to furniture. I just felt so alive with my own being. I noticed what was going on around me. My older brother was being important, and my mother was looking at him. And I saw this. I suddenly got that this was not enough, that you had to be a successful object in the world. And I remember feeling, oh, my God, that's so disappointing. Do I really have to do that? But it was clear that the entire culture expected that of you. And so I would encourage you when you start reading this book to not do that, okay? No expectations. Just go into this experience. It's a very experiential book. You'll hear my experience of being a divine human, and that should evoke your experience. And then these exercises that will stir it up, and just have confidence that it's going to happen. It's already there. The only barrier is your belief system.
How does aging bring out the experience of the divine human in us?
Well, in so many different ways. First of all, as we get closer to death, our consciousness begins to change anyway as we age. I mean, there's three stages of aging. There's the young old, 50, 60 to 70, who don't really feel old at all. I think they're going to conquer aging, with creams and exercise and surgeries and so forth. Well, that only works for a while. Aging wins. But that doesn't mean we lose. It just means we have to surrender to a life-transforming experience. And so the second stage, 70 to, maybe the mid-80s, we begin to realize that we're aging, and we begin to get intuitions. If we just quiet the mind, we begin to get intuitions of the veil becoming thinner and about the possibility of moving beyond. And here's where dreams come in. The dreams of people who are close to death are not grim and they're not terrible. They are dreams of new life, of trees growing, of blossoming. Or I had a dream recently where I'm standing in our old house, and my father walks out from behind me. I look around, and I say, "What are you doing here? How could you be here? I mean, what are you doing here, Dad?" And he basically says to me, "I'm so happy about what you're doing. I came to see you. I wanted to tell you that."
Oh, wow.
And he gave me a hug, and this was not a dream hug. This was not a symbolic hug. This guy was there. I could smell him. I could feel him. I could taste him. It was so wonderful to have him back with me. And basically he said, because I've been writing a lot about, the divine world and that heaven is already here. And he was saying, we, from the other side, want to come back into this world to help you. The ancestors and indigenous peoples from all cultures have been saying this forever, that the ancestors are still involved in this world, and in our scientific materialism, we say, well, that's not possible. They're dead, they're bone. But that's not true. And so dreams like this, and I've had a number of them. My dead son came back and gave me this hug about 8 years ago that just, I will never forget it. It was so solid and so real. And so the more I've been aging in my own process and dealing more and more with these kinds of connections to the other side, I realize it's going to be a lovely journey. Now, and then so the other thing that happens as we age is we begin to, as this time runs out, you can only live in the present because the future is getting shorter and shorter. So you get more and more amazed at the present moment. The way the sunlight plays on your grandson's blonde hair, for example, or the smell of cookies baking. And though you may not have this experience too many more times, it just fills your heart with the wonder of the world, and you feel such gratitude for existence. Those are spiritual experiences that happen in aging. Aging does not have to be a grim descent into suffering. It's about a celebration of your life and about the life force and about becoming what you've always going to be in the first place. So I could go on forever, but there's lots of ways aging opens the psyche to the divine world.
So aging is being born back to the divine.
Yes.
It's it's a passage.
Yes. It's an initiation into a new state of consciousness. Yeah. I've
asked you this question 2 times in the last 2 interviews. I want to ask you again because the answer is probably going to be similar, but I know it's going to be different. The closer a person gets to death, we think about, as at any particular age, we may think about, we're going to die one day, And it seems to me that someone's now 75, 78, 80, 83, that they would start to habitually hyper-focus on when is today going to be the day. And the question I posed to you last year and the year before was, do we have more grace given to us to alleviate our fear of our soon to be passing the closer we get to death?
It's up to us, really, because if you cling to who you used to be and worry about whether that person's good enough, you will fret about dying, and it will be a worrisome experience. When you stop thinking and move into this other state of consciousness, there's such a profound sense of peace and comfort that you just know it will be okay, whatever happens. So it really is up to us to interrupt if you fret about, is this the moment, is this the day? Or you could just lie down and relax and say, if it's time, it's time. If it's not, it's not. I know it's going to be fine. Oh, people who have had near-death experiences, they're not afraid of dying because they've been there.
Right. And there's nothing you can do about it. You might as well let go.
Everybody dies, Right. It's part of the journey.
And maybe ironically, the most amazing transition in life is the most amazing thing in life is death, because, we came from there and we're going back home. This is just a little vacation.
Yeah. We became an image in the world. We lived it out, and like a wave, we return to the oneness. Though it's quite clear that on the other side, we continue in a form that is identifiable as us, to the extent that we haven't fully overcome our identity with the self idea. So then we have a causal self that, I can talk to my parents on the other side, and it's really fun to hear what they're up to. They're going on with things, they're finding new challenges and so forth, and my grandmother too. This is but one day there will be, I said, there will be a time to let go of that, and that's fine. You let go when you're ready. I think we lost it.
There we go. I have so many buttons over here. I wanted to ask you, just for the sake of playing with a fun question. And that question is, I wonder if we have pauses, conscious pauses when we get to the other side, or are we just aware all the time?
The other side is not far away. It overlaps with this side. It's always here. Right. So when we stop, there's those moments when the dust motes are coming in the kitchen window and then the light is playing on them and you're not thinking, you're there. You're in both spaces. And so, in between this thought world and the fathomless world, there it is. You can experience
I totally agree with that, John. It's not that we left. We didn't leave anywhere, because if we left, we couldn't be here. We have to be connected. We have to be connected to the source of who we are.
Right. There's only one thing. Yeah, and this is it. And our thinking takes us into another world of thought, but it's not different from the divine world. It's just we've segregated a kind of a mental frame that we live in, like a playhouse. And we can leave it.
How does becoming a divine human lead to sacred activism?
Well, in a lot of different ways. What happens is that you begin to see the utterly unnecessary suffering around us, but people who believe their own stories about their own life or about what's wrong with other people's lives and so forth. And then, so you begin to want to, and your heart is so open that you just want to be present, and you want to say, take a deep breath, and you do this on a moment-to-moment, here and now way. It's not about going out there and saving the world. It's about loving the cashier, and making friends with and waving at the neighbor as you walk by, and babysitting for your kids, as I'm doing right now. And you just open your heart, and the world is a better place. That could be called sacred activism, because you're no longer distracted by purposes. You're in the divine present, loving it just the way it is.
And so when one changes their own world, it begins to influence the collective experience to shift along with it. That's how you change the world, is by changing your own.
Right. Yeah, we are all swimming in this one sea of consciousness, and the more each of us wake up, we affect everything. Our awakening and the love that flows through us literally is vibrating the whole, web of life and of the universe. And so my awakening is not just like some kind of selfish thing. It's part of my gift of life. That touches everything in the entire cosmos. That's how important we each are to wake up.
So we are in a time of collective spiritual evolution. Would you agree with that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah.
And people are rising up. People may think that the uprising that's happening in the streets is a bad thing, whether it's a bad thing or not. The fact that people are uprising, they had enough, that things are the pot is being stirred, so the divine ladle can scoop out the magic or the right.
Yeah. Well, it's so clear that when one person is hurt, we all feel it. And so, or if, you got to see a 2-year-old wandering across the freeway, you don't worry about yourself. You run out there and try to save that 2-year-old. There's an instinctual response to there's the beingness of life that we will have if we get out of our heads and into this much more sense of loving and being present to the world. And that's changing. We are much more conscious now, and we have much more understanding of consciousness than we ever had in our whole evolutions. And there's a spiritual process taking place. And I think aging is part of the new aging is itself a stage of spiritual evolution. And so the elders, as they're waking up, they're giving back to the universe this kind of vision of what could be. And they give it to their grandchildren. They give it to their kids. They just give it to the way they live.
John, I've always wanted to, and in fact I did this last year. I went to a convalescent home and spoke to the people at the desk and asked them if I could interview and let them pick probably 7 to 10 of the little blue-haired people and and have them tell me the story of their life. And of course, I would have certain questions I would ask them, and the same question be posed to all 8 or 10 of them. And I'm still considering doing that, and I've thought about it a lot in the recent past.
One of the most important things we can do for our older family members and others is to ask them to tell their story, because they need to make sense out of it for themselves so they can move on, and they need to be validated. Their life was worthwhile. And it's utterly fascinating to hear what people have lived through and what they thought and where they went. And it's so validating that it's spending time with older people and listening is one of the greatest gifts you can give. And it's cheap and it's inexpensive. And it's beautiful. And
I think probably in some way that because they are nearing their time here on Earth in the physical way, that it gives them closure to tell that story one last time.
Yes. And they sense that they are giving you a gift. They want to give you something of their life. So it's a wonder.
It's both-sided. It's a shake hands deal. They're giving you the gift, and you get the joy of hearing about their life. But to them, it's like, sealing the book, closing the book, sealing the deal.
And that's a task we all have. What is our legacy? And our legacy is how we've lived our life, and so writing letters to our kids and grandchildren, or speaking into a tape recorder and telling the story of our life, or teaching our grandkids how to fish. This is our legacy, and it's priceless. It's precious. How many of us wish that our parents had told us more about their lives? So do it. I would encourage everybody to do it. The conscious aging movement, which is really worth everybody getting involved with, will help you approach aging from an entirely new perspective, one without fear, one with so many people doing this work of coming alive as older people. It's grand.
I love it. John, we are slowly but surely coming to the top of the hour. Would you give me your, listen to the listening audience, your address and how they could find more about you and your awesome works that you're involved with, sir?
Yes, please come see me. I'm at www.johnrobinson.org. So it's JOHNROBINSON.org. Or just look that up on internet and my name and .org, and you'll find me. And leave me a message. I got an email thing there, and I love to hear from people, and I'll answer it.
John, give me a final thought. Maybe about what's happening and anything that you think that we can take with us after this interview and begin to implement it in our life so we can become that divine human, at least a little more of it.
It's always and forever about love. It's always about moving out of the mind which tells us everything is wrong and everything's full of fear, and moving instead into everything is already perfect. It's divine. And if you will open your heart, you'll discover that there's very few things that truly need fixing. There's just everything needs loving.
Let me ask you, what is love? Because most people they don't have a true grasp on the meaning of what you're speaking about in love. They think it has to do with the relationship or this or that. Give me your definition of love, sir.
Gee, that's a wonderful, wonderful question. Love is a state of being. It's not like falling in love so much, and it's not like it's like when you are one with your own being. The love is just there. Love runs the universe. The consciousness and love are two names for the same energy that is everything. So as we learn how to merge with that state of oneness, what we find there is the love. And I'm sure it's ineffable, and I'm not sure you can reduce it to anything else. It just is, and that is what we are. We're made of love. And you'll never be happier than when you're loving.
I dig that. And I totally agree. There are some aspects of love. To me, one of the biggest aspects of love is allowing. Yes. Allowing, leaving. That's what love is. I have no agenda to manipulate it. I accept, allow, and appreciate it as it is. That Perfect. To me is love. Well, that's the attribute of Creator. Creator doesn't fix. he admires his creation and so forth. All these, and he allows us to be as we are, faulty or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to love is in loving. There's absolutely no judgment. You see everything is infinitely beautiful. So it's enough. You're enough. You're beautiful. The more you see in the state, the more people's faces begin to glow. And you are so beautiful.
John, thank you as always for being just a great guest here on Center of Light Radio. I love it, man. I appreciate your presence every time you come.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Keith. It's a great joy. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, sir. And listen, you got my phone number now. You can contact me just to say hi, and we don't have to wait once a year to have a dialogue.
Will do.
And if you ever come Mid-South, let me know. We can hang out. And
Yeah, that would be great fun.
Peace to you, sir. Thank you again, everyone. Mr. John C. Robinson. You can find him at johnrobinson.org. I think that's correct. Listen to this, guys. Next week, can you imagine a lifestyle without eating food? Ever eating food again, ever. It's called Breatharianism. My guest, Darrell Brand, is going to be here. He's been practicing Breatharianism for 9 years. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you don't have to have water either. People say, well, you're going to die. Well, if you think about it from this approach, that the sunlight grows the grass that the cows eat. And if you're a vegetarian, you eat vegetables it's imbued with sunlight. Or you eat if you're a meat eater, same thing. Why not get it directly from the source? You get the, quote, middleman or the middle component out of the way. You get it directly from the source. It's called sun gazing as well. But you don't do this in ignorance. You don't. There is a practice that is safe to do. And through this sun gazing, you are taking in light. People say, well, Keith, don't you burn out your retinas? Well, that's why you have to go to people who know exactly how to use this practice and be taught. People who are responsible, like Darrell Brand. He's going to be here. So check it out. It's a lifestyle without food called Breatharianism. I'm excited about this interview. Also, September, Swamiji Viswayogi, God-realized man from India, this man right here, is going to be in Center of Light Radio. He is the first, quote, now take this in the context it's meant, even though John and I show is about we are the divine human, the first God energy to ever walk on this earth. This is his 9th incarnation. Also, Memphis Metaphysical Fair is going to happen August 5th and 6th. August 6th from 3:30 to 5:30, I will be doing an interview? Boy, I've been working 13 days in a row, sometimes twice a day. I need a break. I'm going to be doing a presentation there on radical transformation. I'm going to open you up on the spot, and then I'm going to empower you with some tools that's going to keep you open. And then you're going to send me emails going, oh, my God, Keith, what did you do to me? I'm going to say, that's exactly what I did to you. And you're going to expand like John was so finely talking about the awareness factor that we talked about in Center of Light Radio. Speaking of Center of Light Radio, every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you can find me sitting in this chair, conducting all the affairs of the heart. That's what it's about. That place right there, that's a stargate. Pop that thing open and watch what happens to your life. And you do that by meditation every night before you go to bed. If that's your only window to meditate yourself to sleep. And you will find yourself in that deafening, profound silence that will shave miles off of your journey to becoming the divine human. That's the gig. There is no other gig. Peace, love, and light to you. I'll see you soon.